the idea that the Bible itself now has become corrupted, which means that there has
guys, are we supposed to follow it according to Allah? Yes, it's a command. He commands Christians repeatedly to stand upon our scriptures and to judge by our scriptures, to judge by the revelations that have come to us. Read Surah 5, verse 47. Read Surah 5, verse 66. Read Surah 5, verse 68. He says it over and over again. Christians have to judge by the gospel. But the gospel's been corrupted. Then once again, your God is an idiot, Hijab. That's all I hear from you. My God doesn't know, but I know. You don't realize how insane this is from an Islamic perspective, because it's understood in Islam from Muhammad himself. When Allah says one thing and you listen to some guy over Allah, you're worshiping that person. You are worshiping him. You are deifying him. You are associating him as a partner, and he's even superior to Allah. When you say, here's what Allah says, but I know better, and you go along with that person, then you are worshiping that person. And yet you have all of these Dawah fans. Allah can say over and over again, Christians have the gospel, Christians have to judge by the gospel. No one can change Allah's words. And then Hijab could come, Allah's words were corrupted over and over again. And that's why you never judge by the Bible. You don't do that. And they'll go with Hijab and not with Allah. What is happening? They have idolized this man. They now worship him. They have associated him, Mohammed Hijab, as a partner with Allah. Everyone who listens to him is now worshiping him. And this is not according to me. This is according to Muhammad. And people, and they just don't care. They just do not care.
It's going to get worse. He's going to, again, lie about what scholars have said here.
Have been taken out of it, which is why you have contradictory versions of the Bible. We have the New International Version, the King James Version, the Revised Standard Version. All of them have contradictory information. They're not all the same because they depend on different manuscripts.
That doesn't make any, that's just wrong. They're translations of manuscripts. They don't have contradictory information. Like, what do you, that doesn't even make sense.
And you can refer to the works of
the Yusuf Ali translation, the Sahih International translation, they have all of contradictions, Oh,
you see? Here's something I want to get to, though. He's going to bring up the work of Bruce Metzger,
who wrote a book on the corruption of the Bible. He was a Christian himself. So it's not actually controversial in the 21st century to state that the Bible, both the Old and New Testaments, have been corrupted thoroughly, ravaged with corruption.
What an idiot. This dude is a lying, compulsive lying idiot.
Muslims believe, because the Quran makes it quite clear, that up until Muhammad arrived and brought the Quran and then told people, accept Islam now or else, Muslims believe that up until that point, the Jews and Christians were considered righteous and had nothing to fear and could have been admitted into heaven. Because that's what the Quran says. The Quran says in the beginnings, when it first talks about Jews and Christians, the Jews and Christians have nothing to fear. In the hereafter, Allah will give them their reward or what they expect, and so on. Muslim interpreters, Muslim scholars have always said this refers to those Jews and Christians until the arrival of Muhammad and the Quran and the instruction to convert to Islam. If the Bible was corrupted thoroughly to such an extent that it was just not possible to follow it without falling into complete disbelief, why exactly did Allah allow it, make it totally possible for Christians and Jews for centuries to just practice this corrupt religion with all these corrupt beliefs and these corrupt pillars and promise them paradise? When exactly did it get corrupted? When exactly did it pass such a point of corruption that it became unacceptable? And how do you exactly reconcile it with the Quran's promise that Jews and Christians have nothing to fear?
Yeah, so about this whole thing, he says that the Bible's been corrupted. Okay, well, Art Ehrman says in an updated version of Misquoting Jesus, you got to get the version that has that little plus at the bottom, plus insights, interviews, and more, because he adds additional content. And he says this in the book. He says, this is Bart Ehrman talking. He says, the position I argued for in Misquoting Jesus does not actually stand at odds with Professor Metzger's position that essential Christian beliefs are not affected by textual variants in the manuscript tradition of the New Testament. What he means by that, I think, is that even if one or two passages that are used to argue for a belief have different textual readings, there are still other passages that could be used to argue for the same belief. So this idea that Christianity has been thoroughly corrupted is not what Professor Mesker says. It's not what even every Muslim's favorite scholar, Bart Ehrman, said, that they said there's textual variants. Yeah, we agree there's textual variants, just like there are textual variants with the Quran, but they don't affect essential Christian beliefs. So Mohammed Hijab is exaggerating what is actually going on here. Yeah, you find textual variants in manuscripts, but that doesn't affect Christian doctrines.
And he did the exact same thing. He appeals to him. Oh, this is known. Bruce Metzger, he said this, blah, blah, blah. Bruce Metzger believes that the New Testament is the best preserved book of the ancient world.
Yeah.
You have textual variants. Do they change Christian doctrine? No, not according to Bruce Metzger. What does Mohammed Hijab say? Thoroughly corrupted. Thoroughly corrupt. I would say thoroughly corrupted is more than just like spelling differences, right? You actually need corruption of the basic doctrines. You can ask Bart Ehrman, do you ever, if you go through any textual variant, do you ever get to a Jesus who didn't die on the cross, who didn't rise from the, no, you don't. You don't have the kind of corruption that Islam needs. What do you have? You have textual variants that don't affect Christian doctrine. Why is this relevant? It's exactly what Muslims now say about the textual variants in the history of the Quran and what they say about the different qira'ats. They actually have different Qurans that are used. We're not talking about translations. He appealed to translation, but look at this translation, that translation. You guys have different Qurans in different parts of the world today. And yes, some of them contradict each other. You could go to a passage about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah when Lot is told to leave. In some of the qira'at, his wife stays behind, and in others, the wife goes out. The wife goes out with them and then turns around. And so you actually have contradiction. You end up with different practices based on some of them will give a singular, and some of them will be used with the plural. And so, guys, just think, if you're going to say Bruce Metzger says that the Bible's been corrupted, what does Bruce Metzger actually? He's talking about textual variants to say they don't affect Christian doctrine. Okay, so what you have to be saying is if there are textual variants and the book's been corrupted, great, you have textual variants in the Quran. Therefore, it's been corrupted, and it's been thoroughly corrupted, according to Mohammed Hijab, since the title of this is Mohammed Hijab Debunks Islam. If you're saying that textual variants that don't affect a doctrine mean that the book has been thoroughly corrupted, that's what you believe, then we can say, according to Mohammed Hijab, since there are textual variants in the Quran, that the Quran has been thoroughly corrupted. And that's not just us. And we don't have to just say that based on the textual variants that we find in the manuscript tradition or the textual variants we find among the different qira'at that are used in different parts of the world today. Once you factor in entire chapters coming up missing, and this is in Sahih Muslim. Abu Musa says that Muslims forgot 2 entire chapters. They were just too lazy. He said, we hardened our hearts. We didn't recite them enough. So 2 entire chapters coming up missing. Large passages come up missing. Surah 33 was originally as long as Surah 2. So you're talking hundreds of verses. That's over 2/3 of the book is over 2/3 of Surah 33 is now missing. Why? Because the only people who had it memorized died in battle. The only people who memorized them, who had the missing verses memorized, they died in battle. You have verses being eaten by a sheep. Can you imagine if we had stories in early Christianity about, we wrote these things down, we wrote down this revelation from Jesus, but then a sheep came over and ate it. And then we don't have it anymore because we lost the only copy. Can you imagine if we had things like that? They would be saying, you see, this is the proof of corruption. We don't have that. You guys have that. And then can you imagine if the third great leader or the third pope or whatever that we had in Christianity, whatever you want to call it, can you imagine if that guy had to burn all available copies of the Bible to cover up all the differences? What Muslims would be saying? They'd be saying, oh, you see, this is deliberate corruption. We don't have that. You guys have that in Islam, where Uthman, the third rightly guided caliph, there were so many variants in the Quran that he says, everyone hand me over all your copies of the Quran. And he burns them all and puts out his authoritative version. We don't have anything like this. But think about this guy. This is Mohammed Hijab. He's talking to, what percentage of audience of the people who are watching have any clue what he's talking about? Very small, maybe 1% to be generous. And so he knows he can get away with this, and he does it. And that's why they're obsessed with not allowing any critic to say, to criticize Islam on these podcasts. They want access to ignorant people so that they can spout complete nonsense because they're liars. And this is all dawah is nowadays.
You know what's the worst thing about all the people who died? All the early memorizers and scribes who died. They all died in the Battle of Yamama.
Oh.